They moved like a reflection moving before the mirror. Two figures perfectly matched and somehow a fraction out of time. June and Jennifer Gibbons were the silent girls in Haverfordwest, then on to Pembrokeshire classrooms, where their laughter belonged only to one another. Wales had a salt wind and a small-town habit of looking up as you passed. The twins walked fast, shoulder to shoulder, heads slightly bent. People called them shy. Teachers called them uncooperative. Children in the yard called them statues or ghosts. Speech therapists coaxed and got a nod for yes, a blink for no, and a hand that rode a pen like a ship across paper. Their family said they spoke plenty at home, gales of language, but in public they drew the world to a pinhole. Selective mutism, someone wrote. Another wrote unusually bound to one another, a ribbon that could cut like wire. If there was a third person in their lives, it was the diary, the private confessor that measured their days. They wrote because writing gave them a way to talk without being understood by anyone but each other. There were notebooks at dusk and novels typed on a mail-order machine, stories set in Malibu, Miami, Manhattan. The sisters would take turns as author and advisor, then switch places without admitting it, daring the room to notice. They were born in Barbados in 1963 and brought to Britain when small. Their father worked for the Royal Air Force, which meant schools changed like seasons. Being the only black children in class made silence a shelter and a dare. They mirrored bites of toast, traded words so exactly a sentence seemed to cross throats, and agreed not to agree with anyone else. Silence was fortress. Doctors studied them like a mystery with a clock in it. One leaned forward when the other leaned back, resisted when the other yielded, fell ill when the other caught light. Counselors proposed separation, the old twin remedy. The trial was tried. June sent a letter from one ward to the other. I feel illness in my heart like a weight. Jennifer wrote back a few pages that felt like a handshake across water. Without you, I am a shadow. Weeks later, they were returned to the same ward, briefly better for the others breathing nearby. In adolescence, the two widened their circle by retreating from it. They tested small crimes, shoplifting, vandalism, a shed fire that climbed too fast. They drank cough syrup and wrote harder. They stood at windows late at night and narrated the street like a stage. There is a daring that is really a plea. When the spree grew into arson, a blaze at a Pembrokeshire school that ate newsprint and patience, the law took their story and gave it a docket number. Broadmoor Hospital in 1982 was a word that dropped like iron. For adults convicted of violence, it was the last door. For teenage girls, it felt larger than the statute. They were committed under a provision that promised treatment instead of prison. The reality was the high wall, a pinched sky, and a strict timetable. June and Jennifer arrived together, and the nurses learned their rhythms the way a sailor learns the turn of a tide. Morning, quiet. Afternoon, private talk. Evening, surrender to sleep. They did not stop writing. If speech had to be coaxed, ink did not. Their diaries carried furnace and winter at once, love and rivalry working the bellows, despair recording ash. Each sister wrote what the other could not say aloud. June would confess that Jennifer's presence pressed her lungs. Jennifer would write that June stole air and light. June called her sister a face inside my face. Jennifer wrote, "We are not two, we are one person split." The pages read like negotiations across a border drawn through a house. Reporters came. A reporter with a soft voice and a good memory visited again and again. She listened until the twins let her into the room where they kept their private grammar. On crisp afternoons, they walked and spoke in rapid bursts the recorder later tried to untangle. They told her they wanted to be famous writers. They told her they could not live together and could not live apart. Finally, they spoke a pact. One would die so the other could be free. A different hospital in Wales was arranged. They practiced a life not yet lived. In the weeks before the transfer, they spoke openly about the agreement. One of us must die for the other to be free, she would remember. Then Jennifer, quietly, saying she would go first. The day of the move in 1993 was British grey, as if already a photograph. They rode in the same vehicle. Jennifer was drowsy, then gone. No struggle, no poison anyone could find, only a failed heart, acute myocarditis, the certificate would say. She was 29. June watched in a hush that did not match the siren. She stepped into a world that suddenly spoke her language. Afterward, the reporter asked June what she felt when her sister died. Free, she said, like someone whose rib cage had been unlocked. Then she cried until the bones remembered how to hold a body that weighed only one. Such words can be misread as celebration. They are not. They are an anatomy lesson delivered in public. This is what it feels like when a shared breathing apparatus is uncoupled and both lungs decide to try their private work. June went on. She went home, she learned slow weather, she spoke to neighbors. She learned to talk to the world. Sometimes she read from the manuscripts they had made in those years when ink was the only voice that could find them. Audiences held their breath, listening to hear one voice or two. She began to sound like herself, a self that had always been there, waiting for a key. As for the Pact, you can hold it two ways. One is to take it as twin telepathy made fatal, the magic logic of adolescence refusing to yield to math. Another is to see in it the plainest and saddest arithmetic. Two young women who could not imagine a future wide enough for both of their shadows, and who, having been told in so many ways that their difference was too strange for a town, too unruly for a school, too dangerous for a dormitory, decided to solve what the world would not. Even in Broadmoor, they tried to keep each other alive in the only language they trusted until it failed. The legend says that when Jennifer died, June began to speak, and that is not wrong, only incomplete. June had been speaking with a pen for years. What changed was the acoustics of the room. She took on ordinary tasks that feel miraculous after life behind glass, posting a letter alone, ordering lunch, telling a joke, and hearing a stranger laugh. She visited the grave. She wrote a poem about a sister and a home. She turned her face toward light. Ask whether the doctors failed them, and the answers split. Some say the failure was diagnostic. The label did not fit the life, and a high-security ward should never be a cure. Others say the failure belonged to the mirror the twins made between themselves, too tight a loop for air to circulate. The truth nods at both, then points to an ordinary cruelty. Different children must learn a grammar the rest of us never study, and are punished for slow conjugations. Stand on a Pembrokeshire street where salt travels in the wind, and two girls walk fast, arms brushing, heads bent to a private orchestra. Stand at the window where a teenager writes in a coded notebook. Stand in a hospital corridor where a nurse catches a whispered joke. Stand by the roadside where a siren stops, and a sister stands, and the world rearranges itself without asking. Carry that sound, the hush after a pact, and the first breath taken alone. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.